Hey, what's up? Welcome to Mix in America. Today I have with me a guest who I knew from back in the day. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that long ago when we were in college, but my college roommate for a couple of years, Chris Villalobos, is joining me today. Interesting perspective. Mostly on this podcast, it's been black and white when we're talking about race, because that's what I know, because that's what I am. But I'm going to bring in a different perspective today. He is Hispanic. I'll let him tell you about his heritage and everything. But LVC, as he is affectionately known to those of us that lived on Kingsman freshman year, and actually I think a lot more people now. But why don't you say hi, LVC? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, hi. I'm glad to be here. It's good to be on.
All right, so LVC is Las Vegas Chris, because we had two Chris's on our floor freshman year. We just gave you the name LVC. Well, I think we just Las Vegas Chris, went to LVC, took on a whole persona, right? We don't need to go into all that, but people still call you LVC. Do you still trying to?
I still get some people who call me LVC. Some people still call me LVC for sure. Not as much as I used to, because that for a while that was the only thing I was ever called. So like to hear anyone call me Chris was weird, but now I get a good variety of some people call me LVC, but not quite so much anymore.
I suppose in the workplace and stuff, people probably call you Chris. That's a more normal thing to do.
I get Chris and Christopher too, which is
Christopher. I don't even think of you as a Christopher. That's weird.
Yeah.
So
it's my birth name.
Yeah. Interesting fact, right? You don't have a middle name because your parents decided that Christopher Villalobos was long enough. Is that right?
That's correct. Although none of them have. My mom has a middle name, but no one else, like on my dad's side of the family, has a middle name. So I don't know. I guess it just was which seemed odd to me, but I feel like Latinos usually have a lot of names, but maybe not so much in America.
What did we call you in college? It was Christopher Alejandro San Antonio Villalobos or something like that. Like we just threw a bunch of names in there. I remember using that a couple of times. Anyways. Villalobos is the coolest last name ever, though. I know we've talked about this before, but it literally means Village of the Wolves, right? Or House of Wolves.
Yeah, House of Wolves, Village of the Wolves, depending on how you translate it. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is awesome, by the way. So let's talk a little bit. Sorry, we'll actually get going a little bit. Let's talk about just your ethnicity, your heritage. I know I think we called you Puerto Rican, which maybe is offensive. Maybe we shouldn't say that. But why don't you talk a little bit about where your parents are from, your heritage, and then what was it like for you growing up in Las Vegas or outside of Las Vegas with your heratage?
Yeah. No, I mean, I still refer to myself as a Puerto Rican, so that's fine. My Guatemalan Puerto Rican family. My mom was born and raised in Guatemala, so she didn't move to the States until she was in her late 20s. And my dad's side of the family is Puerto Rican. So, my grandfather was born there, grew up, my dad was born in New York. So, so, I was born in LA area, so Los Angeles. So that's kind of where I spent the first 12 years of my life. So I grew up with a pretty large, surrounded by my family, extended family. So I was always surrounded by a lot of Puerto Rican people. And so family life was, every major holiday or birthday, Mother's Day, whatever, was just like a big family event with, 30 to 50 family members. So, I think I grew up definitely very intertwined with my Latino heritage and, particularly my Puerto Rican side of the family, just because that's, my mom's the only one out here from her family. So grew up very closely, with that background. And so that was kind of just part of my life. In school, I grew up not really a great area. So it was very much like a very multicultural part of LA, in Paramount, which I don't know if anybody really knows where that is, but it's Compton adjacent, as I like to say, just to throw in some street cred.
Yeah.
not really, but yeah. So anyway, just very kind of multicultural thing, and went to school there again with various people from all kinds of backgrounds. And when my family moved to Las Vegas, I think that's kind of where things changed a little bit for me, just because it was no longer like my family and this huge like extended family. It was just kind of my immediate family, my grandparents. My uncles also ended up living there, but as far as like all those like extended like first, second cousins and all of those tree branches, not so much around anymore. So growing up in Vegas, I mean, really just kind of was not outside of my family. I mean, it was really not quite my area was really not so diverse. So it was just a lot of kind of grew up surrounded by a lot of white people. I mean, there's definitely people from other backgrounds. I mean, it's not like it wasn't just, I wasn't the only like Hispanic kid in my school, definitely not. But, it was just more of a upper middle class kind of upbringing as far as going to school and the sort of people that I was kind of surrounded with. So I had a lot of just kind of, I think it was just a little bit different, I think. And so I think, even just growing up in Vegas, I kind of found myself feeling a little out of place. And I think I like looking back at it now, I don't know that it was, aside from just like those awkward like teenage years of like trying to figure yourself out. I think that certainly was like a big part of it, but also just kind of realizing like not quite, just feeling a little, I think, off familially in regards to like just like family background and stuff. So it's definitely connected to a lot of cultures. I went to like a really big church in Vegas that's pretty well known, and it was very, very multicultural. People from all over the world, different backgrounds who went there for sure. But I didn't necessarily personally feel as tied to, I guess like my Latino background. I grew up speaking English and Spanish. I mean, English is my first language, but I think as I got older, I just didn't speak it as much. There wasn't as much need to, and we primarily spoke English in the home, but my mom definitely still spoke to me in Spanish as well. And so I think in Vegas, I just kind of felt a little bit more disconnected than I did in California. And I think that affected the way I viewed the world a little bit going into college, I guess, and proceeding on from there.
So I do want to talk about college a little bit, but first I want to go back because I kind of forgot that you were originally from Southern California. There's a lot of Hispanics there, but they're Mexican for the most part, right? Was there a lot of other Puerto Ricans? And like you said, your family was Puerto Rican and your Guatemalan heritage didn't really come into play as much because your mom was the only Guatemalan that was there, right? You were with your Puerto Rican family?
Yeah. I mean, I visited Guatemala. So like, I mean, was in, like my grandmother, would come over and stay as well periodically. So like I was connected to that side of the family, just more distantly, just because, all of my Guatemalan extended family were in Guatemala. So didn't really quite get to see them so much. But yeah, no, LA is definitely there's a lot of everybody there, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of Mexicans. I mean, my best friend growing up was Mexican. I'm trying to remember, I think he was born in Mexico. I actually don't remember, to be honest, but yeah, like just a neighbor friend that like my first friend ever, just happened to be, my best friend. Yeah. And, he was just Mexican, close family friend. And, yeah.
Is there much of like I don't want to say not there because there's definitely a distinction, but I mean, like when you get together with, or when you just see other Hispanics, like even if they're Mexican or they're Puerto Rican, like, disconnect, or is it like culturally because we speak the same language, because we're both Latino, we automatically click? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would say there's definitely differences. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a connection in the sense of like you come from this same similar sort of background. Um, that's not, like the majority white, uh, background. So I think there's definitely a connection there. But I mean, there's certainly just a lot of just cultural differences, linguistically, even just like in the
Yeah.
slang that you use and things like that are just kind of different. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's also just a lot of little. I think there's just a lot of like rivalry among
Okay.
the different
Yeah.
Latin American countries, and just jokes and things that just, there's just little, just I don't even know what to, just stuff, that
Yeah.
people are like, oh, Puerto Rican people are this way, or
Yeah.
Mexican people are this way. Like it's just, I think there's some rivalry there, but yeah. So it's just kind of it's a mixed bag, I think, of like feeling connected, but also kind of like, oh, you're just a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. So you talked about being in high school in Las Vegas. There was maybe a little bit more of a racial disconnection in the area that you lived in. But then coming to college, what was that like for you? Because I, again, only knowing my perspective, going to school in Oklahoma, it's not like that south, but for being from Minnesota, it's pretty far south. But I noticed, and not, I don't even think it's like a hateful way or a bad way. I noticed a lot more like, honestly, segregation when I went to going down to school at ORU than I did growing up in Minnesota, where, and again, I don't think it was like out of malice or out of hate or anything like that, but at ORU, I feel like the black people hung out together and kind of did their own thing. And I honestly don't notice what Hispanics did at ORU because I didn't pay attention to that as much. Did you see some of that? Did you notice some of that?
I did notice. I did notice that. I actually, it's interesting because I think coming into ORU, it was definitely, well, definitely different from growing up in Las Vegas and Los Angeles. It's just the mere size of Tulsa, Oklahoma is, it's just very different.
Yeah.
So, and I was there for, I mean, I was, even after school, like I was there for such a
Yeah.
long time. I lived there until, like, with college and the time I spent living there afterwards, probably about 12 years.
Wow.
And so I think my perception during school was maybe not as aware of what was maybe happening in the rest of Tulsa and the rest of Oklahoma, really, than it was like after, actually working in Oklahoma and like just kind of really experiencing the culture there. But in school, I definitely noticed the segregation, and I think that's something like for me, like um, I think part of it's just like connecting with people that who are like from a similar background and that kind of
Yeah.
understand you. And um, I think for myself, I always found, and this is, I think, where I was kind of talking about, like, I feel like the Vegas in me kind of changed things a little bit because I found that I didn't um, connect as well with Latino culture, just because I kind of had stopped speaking Spanish, regularly. So like I wasn't as fluent as I once was and should be. Um, and for some of that, and I think just like out of just like kind of trying to blend in some cases, whether I realize that's what I was trying to do or not, but just be accepted in the broader culture of things. And so I think in school, like I didn't, like, I'm trying to think through like the people that I knew, and I definitely knew people from all kinds of different backgrounds, but like I wasn't super connected to any of the, Spanish, Latin American students, per se. I mean, I definitely knew some and we're close with some of them. But as far as like a large group of them, like I kind of didn't feel quite connected. Just kind of felt a little bit on the outside on some of those things.
Is that why we connected so well? Is because you thought maybe I was Mexican? Because I get that a lot. People think I feel like I don't know. In our group of friends, like honestly, like when I think like freshman year, we're all getting to know each other, right? Everybody is, and I think that's why you do see people with similar backgrounds will connect together because you don't know anybody at school, right? So you're trying to find something. We were the minorities in our group of friends for the most part, right? We had a lot of white friends. I don't know if I ever consciously really thought about that, maybe till later. But did you think about that much?
I don't think I thought about it at the time. Like I think just like the new environment as a whole was just this whole like overwhelming. It was going by so fast. Like I don't think I really like thought about it that deeply. I mean, I think probably more on like a subconscious level, maybe. I mean, I do remember. I don't exactly remember the initial meeting with you, but I mean, I just initial thoughts about you, meeting you, just like trying to wonder. I'm like, oh, I can't tell if you're like, yeah, like, are you Latino in some way? Like that was definitely like something where I definitely thought about that, but I don't know that was like the main reason, or at least a conscious reason of like, oh, I feel like I connect to you. But
yeah,
I mean, we were kind of. Yeah, we were the minorities in our friend group. I never really thought about it. I guess I was conscious about it a little bit because I do remember just when we would go places in a vehicle, just kind of recognizing and joking around about that. But yeah. So I mean, I don't know that it was super conscious.
When I drove, I made sure you sat in the front seat and the white people sat in the back. Right? Yeah. Didn't I do something like that? Like you guys. And you guys have been in the front seat long enough. You guys can sit in the back. That's fine.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I didn't think of it as being like a conscious choice, but I mean, that probably was like a big part of it. And I just didn't realize.
You're talking about racial identity a little bit, like high school, college, trying to figure out everything. And I think all of us, everyone is trying to figure out who they are, especially at that age. How did your race, your culture, your heritage affect you finding your identity? Because like you said, you maybe, stop speaking Spanish as much. But you actually know your heritage. You actually have like you could have like a Puerto Rican flag like up. Like I don't have other than American, I don't really have any other like nation that I claim.
Right.
So how does your heritage actually like affect you finding your identity? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
or does it?
I think it does, because I think there's a sense of just like wanting to kind of know your like just like where you come from, where your family just kind of originates from, and like how those sort of things like affect the way you learn to do stuff. Like why does your family do things a particular way that they do them? Like where does that come from? Yeah, I mean, I think now as an adult, I would say that like I definitely it's become more important to me than I think it was as like a teenager, where like I felt like my primary focus was like I'm just trying to like fit in with the masses of people. And so as how old am I now? 34-year-old man. I find myself like really trying to understand, I guess, some of that a little bit more, but also like just not just like my own like family like background, immediate like my immediate family like whatever, but I think just like the broader scope of like what does it mean, to like what was the history of like Puerto Rico or Guatemala, and like what does it mean to like really be from some of those places? And so I definitely found myself like wanting and trying to like learn more about like some of those backgrounds that I just didn't necessarily know about, just because it wasn't primarily like something my family wasn't necessarily like teaching me Puerto Rican and Guatemalan history per
Yeah.
se. I'm sure like little things pop up here and there, but it wasn't like, it's not like a thing. But now, like, I definitely, even just in like speaking Spanish, and like I'm trying to do that more intentionally um, in my life, because it's important to me, and I don't want to lose that. And I want to be able to, in the same way that like my mom and my to dad to a lesser extent, but like my grandparents as well, like ensured that like I was able to speak and understand Spanish. I want to make sure that I also can do that for my family, for my kids, that I may have. Um, yeah, I don't want to. It's not something that I want to lose and just kind of like blend in.
Yeah. So in Oklahoma, you said, you talked about living there after a little while after, ORU had its, we talked about that, but even outside of the bubble of ORU, the rest of Oklahoma, Oklahoma has, maybe it's just still really segregated, because I feel like Oklahoma is like not very diverse where we kind of were, but there's definitely
Right.
a big native population, obviously. But then you go to the right part of Tulsa, there's definitely more Black people than white people. So what was your experience with race after ORU in Oklahoma? I don't know, was there any situations where you felt discriminated against, or you felt uncomfortable even, or I guess what was that like?
Um, yeah, I worked for a mobile crisis team in Oklahoma, as a licensed counselor. And so I was all over Tulsa and the surrounding Tulsa area. So like I definitely got to learn and know those different parts very well. And Tulsa, like for example, yeah, it's definitely, the city is very segregated in the way that it's just kind of set up. North Tulsa is definitely, that's like where the Black community is. It's a poor community. Like that's just kind of like how, I don't know, everything kind of just got segregated that way. South Tulsa is where all the where all the money is. So like that, that area around the ORU, and even further south of that is definitely where like the money is. East Tulsa, definitely a lot more. That's like where the Hispanic community really is, and even some um, East Asian communities as well. But yeah, so like it kind of depended on like where you were in the city, um, to kind of find some of that stuff. But yeah, it's interesting because I definitely, I don't know if I could say like I had very specific instances of like, well, that's not true. I mean, I definitely had some instances of like racism, particularly doing like the work that I did with other clients. And so I think there were just times where people would not like me because of the way that I looked. They whatever assumed they assumed I was Mexican, or they assumed something of me. I definitely felt like depending on how I was dressed or how I did my hair, I could kind of blend into a lot of different cultures. So like I was discriminated against as a lot of different cultures that were not necessarily the one that I was. So
That's interesting.
Yes, sometimes because maybe I was Hispanic, but other times people thought I might have been Arab in some way, that I was
Yeah.
like, I've gotten a number of different things there. People thought I might be like, part Black. Like, so it just depended on like where I was and
Yeah.
what was going on with my look at the time. But I guess particularly when I was working, like it wasn't something that bothered me so much because I was just doing my job. So,
Yeah.
and I'm dealing in a lot of cases with like people who have, mental illness and things like that. So like,
Yeah.
things happen, things get said, and I just, I try not to let those things bother me. But there were certainly occasions where I felt out of place, and where I felt like maybe I was being discriminated against in some way. I can't remember I'm trying to think of a specific instance. But like nothing super blatant where I was like, oh my gosh, this person like hates Latino people or like whatever.
Yeah.
But certainly in like minor ways where I was kind of like, it's a little weird, but you just kind of brush it off and just not really think about it. But yeah, I think I was conscious of it. It's just kind of interesting. And Tulsa is an interesting place too, because I think it's a little more, or I know it is. It's a bit more liberal than like the rest of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Slightly. It's like a slight little bit more of a liberal kind of thing. Then it's not quite as conservative as like Oklahoma City or definitely the rural parts of Oklahoma. Yeah. But yeah, I've definitely been in places where I felt uncomfortable, but not necessarily because there was anything in particular happening, but I just felt like everyone was looking at me. So yeah.
You mentioned your hair, and I'm going to bring this up only because it's probably stupid, but for me, being half black, my hair was always something that this is going to sound dumb and over making too big a deal of my hair, but that was something that I was kind of reminding me that I was different because I couldn't do, especially as I got older, like I couldn't do white people hairstyles. I tried when I was a kid. And it took me a while to realize that I wasn't fully white because my hair didn't work like that. And then the way that my hair was kind of thick and kind of curly, but not tight, like I feel like my hair made me look less black. Like when it was, cause I tried doing a fro. I don't know if you remember a couple times, like playing basketball and stuff, I would try to like pick it out. But so now I just shave it cause it's easier. But I remember your hair is like tighter curls than mine ever was. Coarse, like, I don't know. Did your hair ever play into, like you talked about, like depending on where you were hair, people thought you were maybe a different ethnicity. Did you ever think about that actually, like your hair? Or am I just being stupid?
No, all the time. I still think about it now. Like it's just, I mean, my hair is long. Like I haven't had it. I mean, right now it maybe, not that anyone's looking at it, but like it's pretty decently long, but it's like tightly curled. So it still looks kind of short and stuck to my head. But I mean, it's just, I always hated my hair growing up just because I couldn't do all the like cool, like white people hairstyles that were going on at the time.
Yeah.
But so just, I always kind of had it short and the older I got in general, like it definitely, like it got curlier, and that is primarily, I mean, the curls are from my mom. Like that's her to thank for sure. And then it's a little just kind of the thickness definitely comes from my dad. But yeah, so like it just was kind of always a thing that just bothered me, just because it was, and I don't know that I think as a kid, I don't know that it was so much like, oh, I'm like this because I'm Hispanic. It was just, I think I just was like, this is just the hair that my parents have. So like, this is what this is what I got, and I hate it, and it's annoying. Because I can't look the way that I would rather look. But like in college, that's when I started to like really like experiment with my hair. So like I started to straighten it out, and I'd like, I'd get a flat iron and just like straighten it, or I'd chemically straighten it, or, I eventually moved away from that and would just kind of use a hairbrush and a blow dryer and just kind of straighten it out that way. And so I did. I mean, I just have a lot of different hairstyles. So it just depended on what was going on that day. And so people always commented. It's a comment I get all the time. And just like, oh, you have so many different looks. Cause like, just depending on the day, like I might wear it curly or might straighten it out and do a side part or whatever, whatever, slick it back. I think I had a mohawk at one point. I did a lot. I did a lot to my hair. I've dyed it different colors. Like it was just like, I bleached it at one point too. Like that was, again, like just a desire to like not have that just be different. Like I want to have blonde hair. So like, I'm just going to bleach it and see what that looks like, which turned out horribly because it was really more of like a orange like color. Oh God, it was not quite blonde.
So did you find out something are you good with what you have now, or are you still figuring it out?
I mean, I'm always kind of changing it. I think in with like the pandemic life, I just stopped cutting it because it was just, I mean, I cut it in the summer when I went back to Tulsa for a visit. I was there for 2 weeks and I went back to my old barber who cut my hair. And so I got it cut then. And then since then, I just haven't touched it. So I'm just kind of growing it out to kind of see what happens. But I think it's just annoying. The curls can be annoying because it's just, they have to like, I think it takes me more time to do this than if I like just try to like straighten the curls out and do something else. So it's one of those things, but you know, it just is what it is. Sometimes I shave it short and it's just easier to deal with that way. But
Well, this is just easier. Plus, I don't have as much as I
um,
used to. So
in the winter, I wear a lot of hats, so like I don't really have to do it. It's just it's nice, and
that's
I'm
smart.
working from home mostly, so people don't really have to see me. So it's just kind of nice time to grow it out and see where things end up. But
All
I
right.
think the hair is certainly a giveaway
Yeah.
now. So like people definitely like spot me.
Yeah.
Although I will say the interesting thing about New York now is that what I usually get is people assume that I'm Jewish, and so like usually other
Okay.
Jewish people are coming up to talk to me because they think I'm
Yeah.
Jewish, and they're disappointed when I am not. So, but that's a whole other issue, different story.
Yeah. You got that ethnically ambiguous thing too, but you're actually Latino. Like I mean, you're mixed
Yeah,
with a couple different Latinos, but you're Latino and you still have that ethnically ambiguous thing,
yeah.
which is always fun. So let's go a little serious now. We had some fun, but I want to talk about being Latino and not. I talked about and not being Mexican. Obviously, in recent years, border wall conversation, all that stuff. Um, there was a decent stretch, and I don't even know if it's over or if it's better or whatever, but where Hispanics were very much discriminated against. I think in this country, um, whether you want to blame the president or whatever, there was some anti-Hispanic stuff, and then racial tensions just in general at our all time. I feel like at an all-time high in our lifetime. With in my city, the death of George Floyd, all these racial tensions. Maybe this is a lot to just throw at you, but kind of like racial tensions in America. Thoughts? Like, where are you at in all of this right now?
Um, I've got to figure out where to start. Yeah. Okay. To start with, like just the border situation. I think in general, like, the country has always had an issue with minorities and discrimination and just kind of just some of the in its history, just,
Yeah.
with immigrants and immigration. So, but um, with the recent stuff, I mean, I spent 2 weeks working at the border with Catholic Charities. I guess that was maybe 2 summers ago now. I think it all blends together.
Yeah.
But yeah. Just because that was in the middle of like when there were so many just people coming over the border, and this was like, when part of it was just like this fear for like, at least the caravanning immigrants coming through was like just this fear of like the Trump administration building the border wall and like they're just not going to get through. So like it was like this mass rush to the border, it seemed like. And so and I worked for Catholic Charities in DC at the time, and so um, the Catholic Charities USA was looking for help for the diocese and some of their border locations, and so I got dispatched to Laredo and got to kind of work there for 2 weeks at one of their essentially like kind of like border shelters. And so for all of the families coming through, essentially when they would be released um, from ISIS, like they would get, what did I just say? Not ISIS, ICE. Sorry,
It's different.
different situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, when they would get released out of ICE custody, they would Border Patrol would just bring them to the shelter and drop them off, and they would just give them new clothes, food, help them connect to whoever they were moving on to, the family members or whoever it is that they were moving on to see. And so, we'd let them call their families, um, and, take them to the airport or the bus station or whatever they had to do in the next day or a couple days. And so, um, yeah, I mean, it was a lot because I think we had, depended on the day, but sometimes, I mean, and we weren't the only shelter there. Like there was two others while I was there, that people got dropped off to. So like, at least the people coming to the shelter that I was at, we would probably see anywhere from like 100 to 200 people come through a day. Um, and so like what I was primarily doing there was just kind of the initial intake of everyone like coming in. So just like getting all of the names of everybody, where they're going, and just kind of those little details. And then I'd greet them, send them on to their little way. So I got to use, and that was it was a lot to see. And these were all like families coming through. There wasn't any individuals. I think those people didn't get released from Border Patrol. They let the families through, but anybody who was kind of on their own just didn't. They were detained. So, but yeah, it was interesting to deal with all that and just kind of see it all kind of in front of me, as opposed to like watching it on the news or like kind of hearing whatever story the news wanted to talk about, and just hearing the spin, but like really just kind of getting to see the actual people, coming through from like everywhere. I mean, people were just like as far south as I think like Chile, and like I had like people coming from way down South America. A lot of them were from Central America, but also had just some people coming from like random places. Even had just like some people who came from I think it was Romania.
Okay.
Who like they came down to like flew down to like Mexico City, and then just joined the caravan on up. And so I think it was Romania. I can't remember, but it was a Eastern European country. But anyway, it's just like, I think for me, it was really, I think it opened up my eyes a lot to kind of what was going on. It was really great to just kind of just be decent and humane to people coming through. I mean, just, people are traveling with their little kids, and, you've got single mothers, or in some cases, like families who were like split up and just hoping to like reconnect with their spouse and their other child who they got separated in the midst of like the border stuff. But yeah, I mean, it definitely changed my perspective.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's a crazy perspective.
Yeah,
they're people.
Yeah, it changed my perspective on things. My mom is an immigrant. She came to the U.S. through the standard like U.S. immigration process. So like she went through the normal legal process to get here, became a U.S. citizen. But I think kind of meeting all those people, just kind of looking at really kind of what they had to do to get here was just kind of unbelievable, and listening to their stories. But then also just like kind of feeling like our country, not the entire country, but like obviously like just, parts of our country were really, I don't know, it just seemed like a lot of hate. I think it just lacked a lot of compassion, is really what I felt from the situation. Certainly like understanding like, okay, yes, like I get it. Like we have particular laws, and they're set up that way for a reason to like, protect our country in general as a whole. But then also just like feeling like that the people were not being looked at as like just as humans, but just
Yeah.
as like this nuisance that needed to be dealt with harshly. Um, and with all the like family separations and all those different things that were going on, like I think it just was, I don't know, it was just a lot. And like I think being there in person like really um, opened my eyes, I think, to not, aside from just like what was going on the border, but like I think in general opened my eyes to like really like some of the darker things going on in our country that I feel like I just kind of glaze over as like a, yeah, we've had these racial issues, but that's more of like a past tense kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's obviously like people who still are racist, but not like a major problem in the grander like society. And I think that really kind of started for me anyway, just kind of like an eye opening of just like it's not really that way. It's just I think it's a bigger problem than I probably allowed myself to think it was for a long time.
Yeah, I think any discussions about immigration control, about border walls, whatever, I think needs to, for me, needs to start with a place of empathy first, of like understanding that they're people. Like you said, laws in place and things to protect our own American people that are already here. I get all that, but if you can't at least see and acknowledge that those are people, and most of us that have opinions about it, and even a lot of the people making the laws about it haven't been there like you have to actually see these people face to face. And I feel like there's a lot of discussion happening over here in the rest of the country, and not enough looking people in the eyes and actually seeing them for who they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, just so many people coming through and just people, I mean, really just, I think after just getting out through all out on the other side, just like really appreciative that we were even there to like help them and, you know, provide for the things that they need. And so, you know, there was
Yeah.
a lot of people and people that honestly that I still think about, like there's just particular people that just kind of stick out in my mind. And I just kind of wonder like what they're, what they're doing, like how things worked out for them. But yeah, I mean, those people were going all over the country to like every state. Like it didn't matter. Like their final destination was like every state in the country, basically.
Yeah.
So people going to Tulsa, I had people going, you know, to like DC where I was living at the time and the surrounding areas there. Somebody was going up to Montana. Like I just I was, yeah, I mean, people were traveling. So
Crazy. You talked about your mom's coming here legally and going through the process and stuff. Has she ever talked to you about what that process was like being, I don't know how old she was, but coming from Guatemala to America, like why she left, what it was like being a new immigrant to America?
You know, we haven't, I don't know that we've ever talked about like the specific process and like what she specifically had to do to get here. We've definitely talked about like just her life getting here. I mean, she came here to, I mean, like most other people who immigrate to America for just a better opportunity, better, you know, better life options. And so she moved, she came to New Orleans. That was her first stop there. Because she had it was a family friend. And so essentially she kind of worked as like a housekeeper for that person. Didn't know any English at all and really just kind of, you know, grew up, or I should say she learned English basically by like going to KFC and ordering food. Like she kind of essentially learned how to order the food that she wanted. Would only order that one thing. And then when she got tired of eating that one thing, she had to learn something else. And that's essentially how that kind of started. And then from there, she moved to Los Angeles. And I don't remember the specifics of why she went over there. I think it was just like another family friend who lived out that way who was like, I can help you get some work over here. But yeah, that's how, I mean, then she met my dad there basically through my grandfather, my dad's dad, actually. My mom knew him and then he like introduced her to my dad. So like it was the whole thing, but yeah. But
That's that it impresses me um what she went through. Like that's tough. Like not knowing, like just learning enough English to order one thing from KFC and then having to teach herself. Like I can't imagine going to a new country and trying to do
yeah,
that. Like
she's
mad
like, I
respect.
learned all the parts of the chicken basically is what she did to start learning English. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, and
man,
even
that's
when she
impressive.
met my dad, like she still wasn't great at English. And my dad, I mean, my dad wasn't really that great at, I mean, he spoke Spanish, but like my dad doesn't really speak Spanish quite rarely. So like, I think
Okay.
between the two of them, it was just kind of like my mom learned English, by communicating with my dad. But
Yeah,
yeah,
crazy.
but anyway,
Um,
yeah,
yeah. Sorry, jumping back into now present stuff. Um, I want to get your perspective, and then we're going to wrap things up because this got kind of long. But I want to get your perspective on the death of George Floyd here in Minneapolis, where I am, and kind of the Black Lives Matters movement, if that's I don't know if that's what they're calling this kind of modern movement. What is your perspective, maybe as a Hispanic, but maybe just in general, on this stuff? Because again, I've really only thought in terms of black and white because that's what I am and that's what my family is. What has been kind of your perspective on this most recent stuff, that the trial of George Floyd is
Mhm.
happening here in March here in Minneapolis? So it's getting talked about a lot more again. It kind of went away at the end of the summer. People stopped talking as much, but it's definitely, the conversations are ramping back up again.
Yeah. I mean, that was it's interesting because I think for me it was like, I guess because it was just so prominent also, but I think like you said earlier, like I think it's definitely like in our lifetime that I can remember, anyway, it's certainly like the big, like the racial tensions are so, it hasn't been like this,
Yeah.
at least in our lifetime, where we're old enough to remember. There was certainly the Rodney King riots and things like that, but like, I don't remember. I don't know how old I
Yeah.
was
Way
when
too
that
young for
happened,
that.
but
Yeah.
too young to remember that. So, um, but yeah, so there's so many different feelings, I think, associated with that. But as a Hispanic person, I think where I found myself struggling within the context of the conversation was like, where do I, as a Hispanic person, kind of fit into this racial conversation? Because I felt like um, there's the issue of certainly what are the origins of our country and like kind of where racism really originated from, at least in our country, with like slavery and like what that conversation is, and where that has brought us to today. But as like a non-black person who still, I mean, with as another minority, which certainly minorities have issues with discrimination and have issues with um, not necessarily being, yeah, I mean, I guess discrimination is the word. There's another word I'm looking for and I've lost it, but are not we're not part of we're not part of the white majority culture. So like
Yeah.
and so in the midst of the George Floyd thing, I think, aside from just the just the anger and just, it's just a lot, there were so many conflicting feelings that I felt with that. So it's really kind of hard to like pinpoint, and I'm, for the purposes of time, I'm trying not to like beat all of that down. So I'm trying to think of just like where I'm at. But I spent, with my church, actually, we had the small group I was a part of. We spent the summer reading a book, um, The Color of Compromise. It's by Jamar Tisby, and essentially it's about um, the Christian church in America and its kind of complicity in racism in America, and how that's sort of throughout the history of America, and how that's kind of played out in the different um, portions of racism and the civil rights movement and all of that into to present day as well. Um, and it was fascinating because I think reading that book, I think really kind of helped me with the internal feelings that I was like kind of struggling with, which was just aside from just the being upset with the way the legal system is set up and the way things are just allowed to play out with George Floyd being killed like that out in public and or not in public even like it's just all of that. But I think where a lot of my anger was coming from was feeling like the Christian church in America was failing in some way in their response, or in most cases lack of response to kind of what was going on and what is going on. And so I think the book really kind of helped me kind of recognize like where some of why I was feeling some of the things that I was feeling, but then also just kind of like understanding the broader historical context of like the way things have kind of played out in our history and how the Christian church in America has sort of been a part of that and been complicit in that and in a lot of ways promoted that. But yeah, I think the struggle was just kind of like how do I become an ally in this situation as someone who in a lot of ways probably is also part of being in a society that wants to perhaps, keep people like myself from my background from rising above, their station. I feel like I personally have been blessed, to not necessarily feel that. Like I thankfully have not, I didn't grow up poor with no money or in a situation where like I really had to struggle to like survive. Like I feel like, I was blessed enough to come from a family that was not necessarily wealthy, but like we weren't poor. So, and now I've, was able to go to college and get my, my degree, and I'm working as a, professional in the mental health field, and have been able to be blessed in that way. But I also think some of that has been, for myself, has been at the expense of like kind of being able to blend in different places. And so, so I think what I feel like where I ended up at the end of all of this, not that it's necessarily over, but is kind of recognizing and starting to recognize like where have I tried to benefit in the system, and how do I and just thinking about like what do I do to like try and I don't know make change. I currently work for an organization that works with people coming out of or who are involved in the criminal justice system. I'm still doing mental health work, but I'm working with people who have those histories and work in those backgrounds. And, our agency as a whole has always done a lot of work with that. But like the recent conversation has been like, okay, well, what does that look like within our own program to ensure that we are combating racism, like in our agency? Like, what are we, where are our blind spots there? Like, what does that look like with equality and the makeup of the people who are promoted and, to management, like, and the board of trustees and the sort of individuals who are involved in that, like, where do we need to make changes? And so we've had a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions about that in the month since George Floyd. And so, which has been nice, but I think it's also in general just a daunting task because there's not a quick fix. And so it's kind of recognizing like this is like this is a long journey to like really eradicate issues of racism in this country.
Yeah, it is daunting, and it is, I think a lot of people throw their hands up or just don't want to deal with it because it's not a quick fix. This time is going long, and I want to wrap this up and let you get back to your life, but is there a final thought or one more thing that you want to say or make sure is said, or a point to drive home to anybody that might be listening to this?
Well, I mean, in regards to race, I mean, I think, not that I have any answers that are going to fix anything, but I think as like someone who's working as a mental health professional and who, you know, works with people to like make changes in their life, I think what I have come to recognize is like the importance of truth and like keeping things in the light, that if you're going to make any changes, you have to be honest about the situation you're working with and what's going on, and be able to like, you know, not try to skirt around issues. And so I think probably in the long run, when it comes to like making any sort of changes, like any lasting change is only going to happen if everyone can be honest about the truth about like what's going on around us, and from there, you know, start working on figuring out how to make it better. Yeah.
I mean, it's good. It is a lot. You're right. But I appreciate you taking the time to join me today, give your perspective, which is very different than mine, because we grew up in different places, we grew up in different families, different heritage. So I definitely appreciate your perspective. Thanks for joining me. And thanks for those of you watching. Join me next week on Mix in America. Hey, thanks for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, can you do 3 things for me? Can you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell your friends?